Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. I'm Ben. This, I guess, was my 2022 Gen 3 KLR 650. If you guys missed it in the regular weekly uploads, I mentioned a couple times now that I am going to be selling this bike to switch it out for something else, so be out on the lookout for that. But before that, I've got a few sort of cleanup items that we need to take care of, which sort of brings us to today's topic. About 3,000 miles ago, I fitted this bike with the absolute most inexpensive muffler that you can buy. For roughly $200, you get everything from here to here. Now, if you guys saw the original video where I installed this, I did have a few problems. I ran into an issue where one of the fasteners that came in my kit was incorrect. Since then, and those fitment issues, I really have not had a problem with this. But there is one thing that I guess I was always a little bit concerned about, even before I ordered the muffler, in fact, due to some of the images that Rocky Mountain has in the review section on this listing. This nice black paint here will eventually start to lighten up a little bit and almost turn a bit purple, which you can kind of start to see a little bit here. Looks a bit worse on camera than it actually is, but it does seem like mine is obviously lightening up a little bit. Now, in the image that I'm referring to, a lot more of the pipe has changed, and my initial assumption and kind of still sneaking suspicion is that this pipe may possibly need to be repacked. Now, I know repacking a muffler every couple thousand miles isn't something that a whole lot of people are gonna be excited about doing, but before you go and pick up that all stainless, never need to be repacked Delcavic muffler, there is one thing that I think you need to take into consideration about this muffler. And that's the fact that this pipe is tunable. This outermost section here is really just sort of a beauty cap to cover up the actual tips. And with that removed, you can see the loudest tip that they have available. This is gonna be the largest diameter, and this is able to be swapped back in once we remove this intersection here. And if I pull this off, finally, we've got the absolute smallest, quietest tip available, which does have the spark arrestor built right into it. Now, if quiet's not your thing, removing this is super simple. However, if you're gonna replace it with this other tip that came along with the system, you have to remember that you need to replace your spark arrestor. And thankfully, LEXX offers a perfect replacement that will slide right into the recess in the pipe. And then all we have to do is slap either our largest diameter, or you could have also ordered the sort of intermediate one that's between this diameter and that diameter. And then the beauty cap will go over that. You put in your 3 fasteners and you're good to go. But for comparison's sake, let's pull all this out of here and we'll set it back to exactly the way it was when I pulled it out of the package. So that's the quietest tip with this in here just because, and then the beauty cap on top. So I'm gonna fire it up cold and then I'll let it sit and idle for a bit until it warms up and we can give it a few wraps. Now, I don't know how much actual performance gain you get out of this, but I have to say it definitely improves the sound quality while riding the bike. It's a much more throaty, kind of deeper sound, and it removes the vast majority of the sort of squeak that you get from the stock KLR exhaust. In regards to decibel limit, this should bring you down well below the 96 decibel limit. So if you ride in an area that's sound sensitive, this is definitely a good thing to keep in your trail pack in case you need to swap it out. That is, of course, if you're somebody that wants to run a louder tip. So we'll swap this in here and see what this sounds like. But of course, we don't want to burn any forest down. So I'm going to swap in my special spark arrestor here. And if you guys are unfamiliar with what a spark arrestor is or does, it's basically just a fine wire mesh that keeps any hot carbon embers that may be produced in the combustion chamber of your motorcycle from leaving the bike via the tailpipe and starting a fire. They're important, don't ride without one. All right, now let's see how the cannon here compares to the pea shooter. So I'm honestly not sure how well that sound is going to transfer through my lapel mic here, which is where all of my audio comes from nowadays when I make videos in the garage, or at least most of it when I'm not being lazy. But for reference, I was standing about here, so obviously kind of in front of the pipe of the motorcycle, or I guess behind it. And then I was basically just an arm's length away from the throttle, so standing about here, picking up the audio from there. Well, since I'm already out here freezing my butt off, I figure I might as well swap this out for the stock pipe and just kind of give you guys a bit of a comparison from that. Now, to be honest, I could care less whether you guys make a purchase after watching this video, but if you are interested in this exhaust or you feel that this video helped you, click the affiliate links down in the description before you purchase anything on Rocky Mount ATV, Amazon, or any of the other sponsors down there. It really does make a big difference, and it is honestly the only thing that allows me to keep making videos. So huge thanks to you guys that take the time to use those links before you buy your gear. Let's see what it looks like underneath this cover here. So nothing too surprising there. Pipes changed color a little bit with all the heat cycles, but it all still looks pretty darn good. I don't see any areas where it looks like we're leaking a lot of exhaust air. There is a bit of a dark line here, which I would assume is due to gases leaking around the tip. However, I didn't actually put any RTV or anything in there when I swapped the tip, so that might have helped that. Otherwise, on the back side here, I'm not seeing anything that's throwing any red flags for me. All looks pretty good. And if I recall correctly, I believe it is this fastener here that I actually just had laying around and stuck through here. The stock one just wasn't long enough. But I did purchase this over 2 years ago now, so hopefully you just don't have to worry about that at all.
I did actually want to take a pretty close look at the inside of my plastics here, which do look just fine.
Because I got a little bit lazy and decided against putting any sealant in this connection point here or this one, and I have not noticed any negative impacts of doing that. However, I would of course encourage you guys to follow the instructions that come with the kit.
Now, as I mentioned, I of course don't want to try to talk you into buying one of these, but if you do, I would highly suggest buying something like this with a little hook on it to help you put on or possibly remove these springs here. You can do it with other tools, but there's nothing quite as easy as having the right tool for the job here.
And it probably is worth mentioning that along with the tunable tips that you can purchase, you can also purchase replacement parts like the packing and these little springs. Now, I'm not sure if they fixed this yet, but back when I purchased my muffler, I actually had to order it for a 2018 KLR 650, which obviously turned out just fine. They didn't change anything that would have restricted me from putting this on a 2022, 2023, or 2024 model, at least not as far as I'm aware of. Obviously, on the opposite end of the exhaust with the O2 sensor and I believe the smaller diameter header pipe, things have changed a bit. But back here, everything seems to have remained enough the same that you should be able to pick up a muffler from any Gen 2 and make it work on your Gen 3. All right, let's get this thing off of here. There we are. And like I mentioned earlier, these two parts are separate, so we can pull the mid pipe right out. There we go.
Looks like there might have been a little bit of air moving past this seal towards the bottom here, which I suppose is just kind of bound to happen if you don't have any sort of sealant in there. If you did need to replace this seal or gasket or whatever you want to call it, it's actually, I believe, made out of aluminum. You can also order one of these, so definitely a nice option. And with the pipe out of the way, I figured it was worth mentioning and showing you guys that even though I did not trim any of the plastic in here, like I believe the instructions said you may have had to on a Gen 2, I did not end up with any issues because of it. I figured it'd be pretty silly to have both of these sitting side by side and not do a weight comparison for you guys. So this one claims somewhere around 7 pounds, and originally I thought it was 10, but no matter what I do now, I keep getting right around 7. I think my scale probably just isn't quite accurate enough to measure within a couple pounds, but with the giant cannon on here, we're at 14 pounds. So definitely some weight savings there. Let's take this thing apart and see what it looks like on the inside. So I've got all the screws around the perimeter removed, and I'm actually going to pull this and the spark arrestor out. Then if you look on the inside here, there's a little bit of a lip on this cap. So I'm going to slide a dowel in from the other side and try to push that out. I'm just wrecking my dowel. Let's try a breaker bar instead. There we go. So there's our fiberglass. Looks a little bit more like hair than it does fiberglass. And of course some wood chips. So this stuff obviously doesn't look like it's brand new, but to me it doesn't really look that bad either. I think the only reason that I was getting a little bit of this purpling going on at the end here is just because this tip really isn't thermally broken, and also there are maybe a few spots here where there could be a little bit more insulation, but honestly I don't feel too bad about putting this back together. I think I could get quite a few more miles out of this. All right, now let's see if we can get this giant thing back on here. Bike is up to operating temperature again, so let's see what type of symphony I've been missing out on last couple thousand miles.
Well, I've got to say, listening to this in the garage in comparison to the LEXX pipe was a bit of a letdown, but out here, it actually is kind of nice. Now that I can hear that desnorkeled intake, I never really understood what people meant by the sort of throaty growl that it gives a bike, but it definitely is exactly, I mean, on point. That's exactly how I would describe it. And it's kind of cool. Obviously, I don't have really anything for an exhaust note here, and anybody behind me is going to hear that sort of awkward chirp that the stock pipe lets out. But it is kind of it's something that I didn't expect anyways. Now, as far as performance goes, I do have a video sort of dedicated to the mods that I made to this bike, both the desnorkeling, the air filter, and then when I was messing around with the tips on the pipe the first time. And I would encourage you guys to check that out, and I stand by everything I've said, but I do have to say that, especially with just the pipe removed and the stock pipe swap back on here, I really don't notice a huge difference. Honestly, I think as humans, we overestimate our ability to determine how fast something is. It's just a hard concept and a hard thing to pin down and really compare when you're talking about something as minuscule as the changes that I've made here. I don't think this is going to prove too much with my big winter gloves on and my half-frozen feet, but let's do a 0 to 60. Ready, go! No, that does feel slower. If you want to get the most out of your bike, the best thing to do is open up the air intake and open up the exhaust discharge, and then add more fuel accordingly. But it's never going to change what type of bike you're on. It's still going to be a 650 thumper. You're never going to get gobs of horsepower out of it, but at least you'll know it's tuned to as good as you can get. And honestly, what I think the biggest benefit for me of doing stuff like this is how much it affects sort of the really low end. It's nice to be able to just crack the gas, pull the front end up, and have the wheel come off the ground. And I did mangle my hand up pretty good, but we'll give this a little bit of a try just to see if there's any noticeable difference. Well, forgot to cover the rear brake there. It's been a while. It still comes up fairly easy, and this has actually got quite a bit of fuel in it. Obviously, if you're looking for absolute optimal performance, then, well, you shouldn't be looking at a $200 muffler. You should be looking at like a $500 or $600 muffler and probably a full system. And that's when you're going to start to really need to change the fueling. For the changes I've made, the fueling definitely should be changed. Obviously, the bike hasn't melted down in the 3,000 miles I've been riding it, but fueling adjustments would be the right thing to do. Obviously, it's fuel injected, so it can sort of compensate a little bit, but not enough to really get a whole bunch of power out of it. And I've got to say, all in all, I mean, I'm pretty darn happy with that LEXX pipe. For 200 bucks, it's really pretty hard to go wrong, as long as you've paid close enough attention and you understand what you're going to get. I don't think you'll be disappointed, but if you're looking for different options, I can put some other ones that I mentioned down in the description. Until next time, guys, take care, stay safe, stay swanky, get out, enjoy this beautiful world any chance you get, and if you can't do that right now, here's some more videos to check out in the meantime.